Hi, I'm Claire Boyles. I'm the author of Fidelity, which is my debut collection of short stories that it will be published on June 15th of 2021. And I'd like to start by just thanking the Boulder Bookstore for supporting me and all other authors and just being a really tremendous community resource. Fidelity is a collection of 10 stories set in the modern American West, mostly in Colorado. The stories span the decades from 1970 to what I think is a plausible near future. Many of the stories follow the same characters and families over time, but not all of them do. But all of them do sort of explore the impact that land use decisions in mining and oil and gas and agriculture and irrigation have on the lives of families and humans, and especially women. In one story, a woman delivers her fourth baby alone in a Nevada ghost town. In another story, a 74-year-old Catholic nun turns to eco-sabotage to stop a fracking project near the elementary school where she taught for a number of years. In another, a young farmer hides her chicken flock from the government during a bird flu epidemic. Those are just some examples of the stories that are in the collection. The title, Site Fidelity, is a scientific term, which is the tendency of certain animals to return to the same places over and over again. Often it's a breeding behavior. And I found the concept of it like a really beautiful, romantic idea, but it also is very dangerous because if anything changes in the site, in the place that the animals are returning to, or if that place for some reason disappears, most of those species find it really hard to adapt. And it's a very destructive force for them in that case. I learned the concept through the Gunnison sage grouse, which it's a threatened species of sage grouse in the Gunnison, Colorado area. And once I sort of realized that the collection was so much about land and threatened land and the ways threats to lands are threats to humans and sort of the backdrop of climate change and the climate catastrophe that runs through all of the stories as a common thread, it just started to feel like a metaphor that worked on a lot of levels. My own connection to and love for the places that I've lived, and also just humanity's essential reliance on a healthy planet and the dangers of not making sure we preserve that planet. One of the questions that Boulder Bookstore asked me to talk about is which of the stories in the collection was hardest to write, and that would be the first story in the collection, which is called Ledgers, which is about a young ornithologist, Nora, who returns home to Gunnison to care for her rancher father after he has a stroke. She gets involved in saving a Gunnison sage grouse breeding lek after they sell their family ranch to a new owner, Henson, and there's some conflict surrounding that. The story, usually I start a short story with just an idea of a character or a snippet of dialogue or some real life event that has captured my imagination. And then I sort of let the conflicts and the character development and the mysteries of the story unfold as I go. I feel like I'm often, telling the story to myself, like discovering the story as I tell it to myself in those early drafts. And with this story, I did so much research on the Gunnison sage grouse. I went to Gunnison and watched there's an organization that gave lectures on the Gunnison sage grouse and then guided viewings of a Gunnison sage grouse lek. And while I was in Gunnison for that, I also went to the public library and did more research on the Gunnison sage grouse, the history of it, and the history of the area, especially the reservoirs and dams that are part of the Colorado River Project. So it was more like preparing to write an essay, then a short story. I had all these facts, and I sort of had to build a narrative around the facts rather than starting with a story that I like on a human level. The idea of the ledgers, which are like little mini journals that are important to Nora and were important to her pop, came from two places. A lot of mostly men that I know, blue-collar men, keep ledgers like that. My husband keeps a ledger. He just will write down things like, saw the first bud on the apple tree, or whatever happens that day. My grandpa kept a ledger. If you go through the water archive at Colorado State University's library, you can find ledgers of ditch writers going way back, just scanned in, and I find them really fascinating. The other thing that happened is that I was reading Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower, and in that book, the character Lauren keeps a journal where there are a lot of facts that help build the world. And so between the ledgers and sort of the story of Nora and her dad, I was able to find a way to get the real life information about the Gunnison sage grouse into that story, which was a real challenge for me at the beginning. The bookstore also asked which story was the most rewarding to finish, and that one is titled Lost Gun, $1,000 Reward, No Questions. That story is about two adult brothers who go to the Nevada desert in search of their father, who left the family when they were young. And it's told in a series of emails from the oldest brother, Charlie, to his mother, Ruth, who has dementia. Charlie is the narrator. He appears in an earlier story in the collection as an 8-year-old boy. And his adult voice is more lyric and experimental than I typically write. And so the language itself was a fun challenge, but it was a challenge. The story is a story that was really close to my heart, and I struggled with it for years, where I knew it was close, and I also knew it was missing just like maybe one or two things. And then, so it took a while before the final imagery of lenses and clouds and what Charlie can see and what he can't see sort of came to me, which really was, I think, what the story needed. I also went through multiple less engaging titles before I realized that Lost Gun, $1,000 Reward, No Questions, which was always a line in the story, worked really well as a title for the entire story as well. It was just a story I struggled with but believed in for a long time, and I was really happy when I felt like I was able to make it come together. I'm gonna read just a short section of a story from the book called Sister Agnes Mary in the spring of 2012. This is my 74-year-old Catholic nun character. And I'm not going to start at the very beginning, but I think you don't need to know anything to follow along. So here is an excerpt from Sister Agnes Mary in the spring of 2012. Sister knows better than Father Morell about the possible harms of the fracking project. The church supported Sister through a PhD in ecology when she was a novitiate. And then it asked her to spend her lifetime as a kindergarten teacher, tying shoelaces and zippering jackets, which she did without complaint, which she came to truly love. Now, her aching joints burn despite the pillow she places between them and the wooden kneeler. She has belonged to her order, to the church, to God, and she once found solace in that belonging, was ever obedient to it. Now, she struggles with what exactly her faith demands. How to behave when she suspects that God's laws and the church's laws are not an exact match. Mano, Sister's younger blood sister by 8 years, arrives and kneels on her right side. Mano's hair is wind-tousled, spruce-scented. Ruth, Sister's other blood sister, a year older than Sister, kneels on her left. Ruth smells like burnt toast. Her sisters often meet her for morning prayers, and Sister is glad for their company. There are no other nuns left at St. Paul's. Some have died, some have moved to convalescent homes. One is in prison for writing Bible verses in blood on nuclear warheads after breaking into a secure facility. Sister has always seen this last act as vanity, action to get attention more than action to do good, but now she feels more confused than certain. She doesn't know whether a lifetime of prayers for a broken world, prayers she has fervently delivered, is sufficient. Her prayers have become heavy with her doubt. Father Morell, Ruth says, is planning to let John March put a gas drill rig on the vacant lot behind the school. Ruth likes to be first with the news. Sister is fine allowing this. Right there behind the playground, Mano asks, so close to the children? These ridiculous men, Sister says, shaking her head, and their nonsense ideas. Fracking, Ruth says. It sounds like spitting. Ruth has long been suspicious of the increased air pollution from fracking in town, tells Sister and Mano stories she hears of miscarriages, stillbirths, preemies that fit in the palm of someone's hand. Ruth is a retired labor and delivery nurse, has delivered half the population of Greeley, Colorado. Sister taught kindergarten to the Catholic ones. Sister loved those children, loves her sister's children, loves all children. Mano painted landscapes and portraiture for money, built found object sculptures for art. Now retired, the sisters drink coffee, play gin rummy, volunteer a few hours a week. We should call our senators, Mano says. Mano's their activist, member of the Sierra Club, avid reader of Rachel Carson and Edward Abbey. Makes signs, pick at the corners. Ruth pokes Sister in the ribs and then points toward the ceiling. What does your husband have to say? Ruth means God, of course. She likes to tease Sister. It's lighthearted, this teasing, Ruth's love language. Sister shrugs. Man of few words, she says. Mano and Ruth giggle. The silent treatment, Mano says. Sounds like all three of my marriages. Maybe he thinks that after all these years he shouldn't have to tell you what to do, Ruth says. Maybe he thinks you should just know. Well, I don't. It's maddening. Sister detangles the rosary beads from her fingers, wraps them loosely around her wrist instead. Her sisters are having fun. She tries to relax. Mano nods. That exact kind of maddening caused 2 of my 3 divorces. She can't divorce God, Ruth says. Her sisters look directly at her. Their dresses rustle. Their shifting weight makes the old kneelers settle and pop. You 2, Sister says, are really snagging my knits. This makes all 3 of them laugh, their departed mother's favorite way to chastise them. Sister returns to her knees and to the rosary. She keeps the book of Revelation clear in her mind's eye. Mother Mary sprouting eagle's wings to escape the beast, riding the thermals high above the Solace Desert. Mary stalwart, born by her solitary strength and faith. Mary rewarded. Thank you again. My name is Claire Boyles, and my debut short story collection is Fidelity. Please support the Boulder Bookstore.